Hi, and welcome to the one and only awesome Loretta Ferrucci.
Thank you, Louise.
Because I know we're gonna have a nice conversation here. We believe in so many things that are the same, and I would like to know from you because we always start there. What's your story? Do you have a story?
It's interesting that you asked that question because I had a problem when I was younger because I always thought, it's this whole thing about the wounded healer that overcomes their wound and then you're able to heal other people. And I've been in a healing profession since I was 24 and thought I had no wound because according to me, nothing terrible had ever happened to me. So I grew up in a family where both my parents were married. We had enough money. My siblings didn't try and kill me. They were much older than I, they're fairly older than I was. And so even though things were fairly volatile, my father was Italian, typical Italian, hair trigger temper, shout and scream, get it all out. And then we just carry on as if nothing happened kind of story. And so I always thought that I was incredibly lucky. And because I had had no trauma or drama in my narrative, I didn't think I was going to be able to cope with my life. I kept on saying to my mother, what am I going to do if like something terrible happens? Because I won't be able to cope with it because nothing terrible has ever happened. And so if we fast forward to, I'm 51 now, so we need to fast forward to when I was about 42, which is not that long ago. I had an incident in my life that sort of unlocked a lot. It was very dramatic for me. I felt like I'd been really betrayed by a very good friend who was actually more like a sister. And I went to a therapist, a psychotherapist, and essentially I went there for her to tell me that I wasn't nuts. I literally sat in but I'm being played so well that I'm starting to think it's me. And I need you to tell me whether I'm crazy or whether I'm not crazy. And so she said, well, you're not crazy, and explained the behavior pattern. And based on all the emotion that came out of that, I continued with the therapy. And she was a Jungian therapist. And so it was all of this, like, how do you feel? And how do you feel? And how do you feel? I was like, well, I can feel. I'm half Italian. We cry and we laugh. And what I realized was I hadn't felt an honest emotion probably most of my life. And it was during the process of the therapy that I realized that in actual fact, there had been what I perceived as trauma. And just because in my mind, it wasn't, I hadn't been abandoned, there wasn't any sort of incest, it wasn't what I considered traumatic, that in actual fact, I literally had whitewashed my childhood. I had made it all perennially positive because I am an upbeat, positive, put your big girl pants on and keep on going kind of girl. And so I had to.
That's what I was going to ask you just now. What did you put in the place of the emotion? And that's the answer.
Yeah.
The relentlessly positive attitude, which
Absolutely.
is what a lot of people.
Yeah, so I was very introverted. So I've got a sister who's 10 years older than me and a brother who's 7 years older than me, and I was the baby of the family. And so it felt like I'd been surrounded by semi-adults most of my life. And I was very introverted. And in retrospect, I realized now extremely sensitive and very shy. And this continued until I was about 10 or 11. And then I had a dramatic incident at school. And I realized, you know what, Loretta, shy and retiring doesn't really get you anywhere. So I literally, I don't know if it was really like this, but this is how it is in my memory. I decided, screw this, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I became... I learned how to rule the room, and I ruled the room by being funny or like witty, sometimes silly, and I developed this really extroverted persona. So up until that point, I had suppressed my feelings through eating. I was incredible. I was obese when I was a child. I was normal weight until I was about 6 or 7, and then something dramatic happened, which of course, in my narrative until I was 42 had not been dramatic because I'd had no trauma, and I started eating. So I was severely overweight, and I was an extremely high achiever. I had to come first. I was like head girl material from the time that I was 7. So that's how I covered it. I covered it with achievement. I covered it with it's not so much sort of from when I made this change to my positive persona, it was very positive. But actually, when I was younger, it was about just get on with it. do it on your own, don't ask for help, tough it out, you'll be okay, and and the way that I got validation for that was by becoming the achiever, I don't know, first in school, the highest marks, distinctions in music exams, things like that. So that's how I compensated for it.
Okay, yeah, and a lot of people do that. This is what for me is so interesting, is that a lot of us finds a persona that makes us feel like we fit into the world and we stick to it. And exactly what you said, it's not until something traumatic happens to us that we will stop. I think all of us have little signs along the way, and we can always like, it's not so bad, or other people have it worse.
Absolutely.
But it takes us actually getting into some sort of stop situation before we can say, I am willing to look at the stories that I'm telling myself. I'm willing to start investigating, because, like you say, obviously this amount of emotion said to you something was not aligned.
Yeah. And it was interesting also because it was coupled with, I was getting to a place in my career where I wasn't happy. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And this person in my life that helped me, I mean, I'm really grateful for her, was going to help me reignite my career. So it wasn't only a personal betrayal, it was a complete identity betrayal for me, because my identity, it's like, you know this cognitively, but you don't really believe that it's true because it only applies to other people. I realized how much of my identity is tied up in work and being successful and achieving. And of course, I was a homeopath, so I dealt with really sick people. And, I was the one who needed to have my shit together. So I didn't, in my mind, feel like I had an option. And so, as you say, there were lots of little things along the way, like burnout, exhaustion, the yo-yo weight, fatter, thinner, punishing myself with food, rewarding myself with food, punishing myself with exercise. All of those things were all the little signals going, hello, 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 this needs to be addressed. But because one of my compensations or my coping strategies was never show any weakness, don't give in, you just carry on going, my girl. And if this thing that you just tried didn't work, you just try harder and you find the next shiny thing that's going to make you feel better.
Right now, the Me Too Club is like all going, yes, I know that. Yeah. Blood sisters, we're doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
The club. Unfortunately.
It is unfortunate, because I think that, but I must also say that it is very difficult, and I'm not blowing my own horn here, but it's difficult reframing the story of your life, essentially. So I think that it's difficult for people who have had a very negative narrative and who have had that, what we perceive intellectually as having been incredible trauma, to see the blessing in that. And it's also very difficult for those people like me who may have whitewashed it, to have to it's very painful to have to realize that, my mother wasn't as absolutely amazing. And, I didn't actually feel as completely loved as what I've told myself. And my compensatory mechanisms or my coping strategies haven't always been good for others and me, because I think we develop those coping strategies to protect ourselves, and they get validated. So like the achievement, every time you achieve something, you get rewarded. Everyone says, oh my God, you're so amazing. Wow, you're so clever. Blah, blah, blah. And so it keeps you in that loop. And to break out of that takes a lot of energy. And it takes a lot of willingness to, to go and like face your shadow and the shadow of the people that you love, because then you have to, as I say, I have to admit that, that my siblings didn't quite have that picture of me that I thought they may have, or that my mother wasn't quite as available as what I thought she was, or that, the things that were traumatic, the adults in my life missed it. They didn't even realize there was anything going on, which is why I thought it was okay. It actually wasn't okay.
Yes. And we do that. So we go on automatic drive and we squish down our own feelings and needs.
Absolutely.
when we are small, and we normalize it, and then the adults don't know. They think we are fine, and the belief system that it's going to be okay. But you know what, Loretta, look, my father was an alcoholic. I knew it wasn't on. I
Yeah.
didn't realize. I thought, you know what, I'm struggling. I'm shy. I don't know how to make friends. I feel really out of place. I knew it was hard for me. I didn't have a name for hard, but I knew it was hard. I completely overlooked the biggest trauma in my life, and that was that my mother sent me away, never to return to my house when I was 12.
Wow.
And unless my brother was not home, which was 1 or 2 holidays a year. Otherwise, I wasn't coming home. Done. Full stop. And I knew I wasn't as special as he was. Muffin. Man, muffin. So sit still. So I knew that, but I just like, you know, my mother went through a divorce. I just absolved her of any blame. You know, she's a nice person. She's working very hard. She's struggling with her health. I absolved her of her whole entire parent adult responsibility to not be the best mother for me that she could be. You know, it took me a very long time, very, very long time, before I realized that she was always the mother of me. So you can come from traumatic circumstances, but your whole outlook is, I'm guilty, I have to be better, or there's nothing really wrong, or I have to just forgive him, shame poor them, because I've always taken the responsibility. And we don't know our own patterns. We cannot see it. We cannot see it.
Absolutely. One of mine also was deceiving myself. I realize now, you know, and so when I had to, so, you know, and not just deceiving myself, deceiving others. So that essentially makes me a liar, right? Now, so that's sort of like
denial.
You're like, ew, I don't want to be a liar. Well, actually, why not? It's part of the human experience. You know, everyone is a liar and honest. We all lie when it suits us, actually. And for me, lying, when I say deceiving myself that way, or lying literally, like, is that I'm always okay. And that I'm always okay. So, and it's okay if you're not okay, because I can help you not be okay. And I suppose that's probably why I went into a profession where I thought I could fix people, which also is a delusion, but it was an attempt to fix myself, obviously. You know, I mean, it's easy to see that.
Anybody who's an adult child, so if you're adult child, which means you took some of your childhood coping skills with you into adulthood. So we are like honestly talking about more than 80% of the world, because we all walk around with completely oblivious, relentlessly happy like you, or stuck somewhere in our story. And we just simply don't know. We don't know everything we are hiding from ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we've normalized it so much, but we have no access to it. But this is honestly an adult child syndrome thing, is that we are always going to have a persona that fits into the world. You know, this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we're supposed to act. We're going to be happy doing that. This is the worst of it. We're going to be happy doing this, because in our mind, what we are doing is we are accepted when we behave in this way. So we're happy. We're happy to give away who we really are. We don't know who we are.
No, I think because most of us are scared what we're going to find, because on some level, we all believe that when we have these traumatic events or whatever that is that happens, you know, we have a belief on some level that we're not lovable. So, you know, if I can't be loved, then, and my coping strategy is getting me accepted, then I have to keep my coping strategy, because if they discover that this is just fake, this is just a persona, then I'm going to be alone and unloved. And, you know, at the end of the day, we all want to be loved for who we really are, except that we're so terrified to show anybody who we really are, because on some level, I think we all believe we won't be loved for who we really are.
But I mean, it's true what you've just said, but we just don't have access to that subconscious thought pattern. So nobody does this on purpose. Yet, 80 to 90% of people are doing that. There are so few people who grow up mindfully, whose parents have. I mean, I had the most amazing experience today, where a boy, I think he said he was 12, sat and drew stained glass lamps for me, and he said to me, "I'm good with drawing." He says, "I'm good with maths." He says, I'm really good with this. I'm good with this. He was full confidence. I mean, I just could eat him up. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to do. We have to say, "I'm good at this, and I'm good at this." And we're so comfortable with saying it, like, glory, hallelujah to this boy's parents.
Absolutely.
He's proud of himself. Beautifully secure in his talents. I love it. And here we're coming from being brought up in a way in which we were taught to don't be conceited and don't be full of yourself.
Yeah. It's not nice to be to boast. It's don't be arrogant.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, how did you choose to be a homeopath?
So I would have said to you that it was by default. It just happened. Well, of course, it didn't just happen. So when I was 3 years old, around about 2 and a bit, I started having petit mal type seizures. So I would be completely conscious. There would be no shaking and all the rest. Completely conscious, but like zoned out, right? Like non-responsive. And of course, in retrospect, thinking about it, my sister, who was 10 years older than me, she was like my mother, and she was having a very, very, very difficult 13-year-old year. She was having that whole puberty year. So I don't think she was too interested in me. And my mother, who hadn't necessarily had to do too much mothering, because my sister did all the mothering at that point, from an emotional point of view, was not really available. And I realize now that subconsciously or unconsciously, I created this in a bid to get my parents' attention. Anyway, I did get my parents' attention, but it also created huge anxiety for everyone in my household. And I went to all the tests and the neurologist, and no one could find anything. It was all very dramatic, flights to Johannesburg. This was in like the early 70s, right? So it was dramatic. And eventually my mother, in desperation, took me to a homeopath. And I don't know what the homeopath said was wrong with me, gave me some medication, and I never had one of those seizures. I didn't have another of those episodes. And I was I wasn't really prone to, you see, I never got normal sick. Like I didn't get tonsillitis. I got the childhood illnesses. I got the mumps and the measles and the chickenpox and that kind of thing. But then I would get weird ill. And when I say weird ill, like, if you took me to a GP, there's absolutely nothing, they would find nothing. And they would say, I would imagine they would probably say malingering kind of ill, because it was an emotional ill more than anything. But of course, homeopathy works on that level. So my mother would take me to the homeopath, and the homeopath would sort it out. And so I grew up from the time that I was 3 with my mother being 100% in the homeopathic camp. Interestingly enough, to maintain the balance, my father was 100% in the allopathic camp. But, my mother was the mother, so she could do whatever she needed to with the kids. So I grew up homeopathically. And then when I was I didn't know what I was going to do. I was this high achiever and very clever. And everyone said, I'll go and do medicine. But how could I go and do medicine? Because actually that wasn't the paradigm that I had really been brought up in. So I was going to study law. But when I was in matric, I actually wanted to be a chiropractor when I was about 15. And it was going to be difficult because we'd have to go to America. It was going to cost too much money, and I wasn't going to do that. And then when I was 18, I was actually seeing a chiropractor and was a matric. I wasn't quite 18 yet. And he said to me, it was like September of my matric year. And he said, why don't you go and study chiropractic? And I said, well, you know what? I can't go to America. My parents can't, I can't get my parents to pay all that money, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, they're starting a course in South Africa. So I thought, okay. So I applied, but then it was like major trauma because I had now settled on doing law and I was accepted at this university, and I was like, it was all cut and dried because I had now finally made this decision. And so I remember sitting in the kitchen crying to my mother, who was an amazing parent to a teenage child. She wasn't so great with very little kids, but she was amazing from the time I was about 9 or so. And she said, well, I can't really tell you what to do. This is like your whole future. So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for the interview, and if they accept me, I'm going to take it as a sign, because I was late. I was a late registrant. I had to write the whole essay, blah, blah. Anyway, I did all this. I said to her, okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this interview, and if they accept me, I'm going to take it as a sign. So I went to the interview, panel of men. And before I left, I said, look, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but can you just tell me how long this is going to take for you to let me know whether I'm in or not? Because I need to cancel everything on the other end if this happens. So they said, well, if you just wait outside for 5 minutes, we'll let you know. And then they called me and they said, well, welcome to the chiropractic course. Said, okay, well, I said that I was going to take it as a sign. And so I registered and enrolled for chiropractic. And chiropractic and homeopathy would talk together. And so when I was about halfway through my second year, I realized, you know what? No offense to chiropractors, amazing profession, but backs and necks and sports injuries, not really my bag. I'd rather be a more sort of general kind of practitioner. And so I changed and became a homeopath, much to my father's dismay, although in his defense, he was incredibly supportive throughout my career, even though, he always would have preferred to just take a pill to take the pain away. So that's how I became a homeopath. But I realized also that I became a homeopath because I'd always had these weird illnesses that created all this anxiety and no one ever knew. And the homeopath knew. And the fact that my mother could take me to the homeopath decreased my mother's anxiety. And again, when I was older, I realized, you know what, Loretta, you've been, every patient is essentially your mother that you're trying to make sure she's not so anxious about being sick, all right? Which is also why I've got such a vested interest in them getting better. So it took me years to get over, to get to that, you've got to detach yourself from the outcome. You're just the conduit. All you can do is help as best you can. And whether they get better or not get better, you can't take that on yourself. That's how I became a homeopath. But then when I qualified, of course, I was then faced with, oh my God, how am I ever going to see, obviously we had clinic years, right? So they were supervised. So we saw patients, but it didn't matter because it wasn't like my profession and I didn't have to feed myself from this. And then I remember the year that I qualified, also massive crisis because I was always going to open a practice, right? So it suddenly was like, oh my God, all these sick people are going to come and see me. And what do I know? So I've been to university for 6 years. I'm 24 years old. Who's going to take me seriously? That what they taught me at university was very useful, but probably not enough. And so I set on a journey of learning as much as what I could about any other complementary medicine therapy that came my way. And I was very interested in funnily enough, I prided myself on being this logical, rational thinker, but I was very interested in the energy therapies, even though I didn't consider myself to be an intuitive person or psychic in any way. So I did Reiki, and I did metaphysical healing. I did Touch for Health. I had also, when I was at university, I actually did acupuncture. I did an acupuncture program, post-grad. So when I started practicing, I was an acupuncturist and a homeopath. And then, because I'd had this weight problem on and off my whole life. So lots of nutrition. I used lots of lifestyle modification in my practice because, I truly believe that was the way, removing those obstacles. And then got more and more into the energy medicine and often didn't really use the energy medicine. I used the diagnostic techniques, but never ever thought of myself as, you put the patient on the bed and then you give them a healing treatment. That wasn't really in my ambit because it was too weird, because I didn't want to be those weird crystal wearing kaftan, I don't want to be weird. I just wanted to be normal.
Too much woo-woo.
Too much woohoo. I didn't want to do the woohoo. And so interestingly enough, I developed my mind, because my mind I could always rely on. My body, not so reliable, right? Because it was too fat and it was too ugly and it was too this and it was too that and it got sick and it did all sorts of things that was out of my control. So, but my mind, I believed I could control my mind. So I kept on studying but at the same time, so not too much of the emotional stuff, but at the same time started doing a lot of these energy medicine techniques. And, in Eastern medicine, particularly, the mind and the body and the spirit are not separated. Neither are the emotions, obviously. And so
this is the reason. This is exactly the reason I want to talk to you, because of this.
Yeah. So I realized that. I'm sorry. Go. You wanted to ask?
No.
So I realized.
I'll interrupt you again.
Yeah, I could see other people's emotional issue. Of course, I could see other people's emotional issue. And so I started linking things like, if they had a problem with their liver, then they may have had anger issues. So then I would question them in that direction because, we, as part of our training as homeopaths, we do counseling because we deal with a lot of sort of mental health issues. And so I had this sort of energy mental with some of the emotional stuff in between. And so those two streams sort of grew into eventually getting to the, I know that changing people's diets and changing their lifestyle makes a huge difference, but why can they not stick to it? Why, once you feel amazing, do you fall off the wagon? Why do you sabotage that? I mean, even myself, so of course, total denial. I mean, I don't do that. Well, I mean, of course I do that, okay? But, I'm the doctor who has her shit together, so nobody knows that I do that except a select few. And so that really started intriguing me. And then I got more and more into the sort of mind-body connection. And I had a teacher, actually, I went to a number of his seminars, but one of the quotes that is like, it changed my life was, John DeMartini said, "The mind always lies, the body never does. That's why God put the clues in the body." And it was like, amazing. Wow. That's exactly it. And so I then started studying, how do you take the body clues and translate them into what is going on unconsciously? Because once we really make that connection, that's when true healing starts.
Okay, so let's just tie everything together before we carry on with this. So we're basically talking about the body-mind connection, and the body-mind connection that is so often, most of the time, completely overlooked by our regular allopathic medicine out there, the medical science, which I have a lot of respect for because I trained in it as a medical technologist. I trained it, and many of our classes were the same as the medical students. So I like science. I like stuff that you can test and measure and see the controls. I like it. But I know there's more. And so I've been healthy my entire life. There was like nothing that I could complain about ever until I got to burnout, until I did too much cortisol and I got to burnout. And there was, and non-stop migraines. And there was nothing medical science could do for me. And no matter what I did, there was nothing except a pill. There was a pill, and it wasn't good enough for me. And that was why I started looking into something else. Yeah. Desperation, highly suspicious. I'm from the Free State, people. Seriously, that's the center of conservative, everything. So you want to go to a what?
Yeah, you want to do what?
A homeopath, the word devil might have been used in connection with it too, so you've got to be like really determined to go and to try something different. So I got to desperation, and from completely healthy, wrong, like you say, overachieving, to desperation because I pushed my body too far. And that was part of why I had to slow down. I had to start listening because I pushed my body too far. And when that first door opens and suddenly it dawns on you, but there's something more out there, then you become quite open to try a number of things. So I'm now an enormous fan of even a few woo-woo practices, because they're not.
Me too. I don't say it out loud very often, but me too.
Kinesiology is like, wow, I don't even know what they do. But I have never been to a kinesiologist that it wasn't completely and utterly like mind-blowing. How did you know this experience?
Absolutely.
We have an amazing Chinese doctor who qualified in China, in Durban. Absolutely amazing. She looks in your eye and she says, "I will fix you, Louise." I mean, she fixed me.
Perfect.
How? I don't even know how. Amazing. And acupuncture. When you've had that miracles from it. And I've just come back from my homeopath yesterday because I've been falling apart from everything, and I already feel better. And I have been struggling for months. So I can't tell people enough times.
Mm.
There's more than our medical science. Our medical science is 120 years old.
Yeah.
And when your emotions and your history and your feelings and all the root causes are not being addressed, because is it not true that we cannot ignore all our feelings and think they are not going to come out somewhere in our body?
Well, it absolutely is true. So what happens is you have information comes in through your senses. So you perceive that information, and then you generate a thought about it. And if the information supports what you think is important, you call that good, an experience. So, you get in the information, and if it supports what is your narrative about what is good, then you'll call that a good thing, and you'll generate a positive emotion. But when you generate that emotion, what actually happens is your brain releases a chemical cascade that goes to every single cell of your body. Everybody, the whole cell knows about that emotion. And so by the same token, when you take in perceptions that challenge what you think is important, you're going to generate a negative emotion. And the same chemical cascade is going to be released. Now, if you feel the emotion and you allow yourself to feel that emotion fully and you can process that, then it gets released out of the body. But when we don't feel the emotion, when we put the coping strategy and we're trying to rationalize the emotion, when we distract ourselves, when we suppress it, when we work more, we exercise more, we eat more, we drink more, whatever it is that we do to distract ourselves, we deny it's there. If we deny it, we distract or we suppress, it stays in your physiology.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if that emotion was 10 years ago. And every time you have a similar trigger, that physical reaction is exacerbated. And so your emotions literally are your thoughts made real in your physical body. And so, it also took me a while to appreciate your emotions can't be fixed. They also can't be wrong. So, when someone says to me, "Oh, Loretta, stop being so sensitive," I'm like, don't tell me. My emotions can't be wrong. So, I might be being dramatic about this, but this is how I feel right now. I might be really angry. This is how I feel, because I've learned that especially when someone says that your emotion is wrong, that's when you're most likely, especially if it's an authority figure, right? That's when you're most likely to suppress, deny, or distract. And those coping mechanisms are the suppression, denial, and distraction. And so emotions can't be fixed. They want to be felt. And most people, if you're anything like me, your feeling muscle, if you imagine it was a muscle in your body, is completely atrophied. It's totally underdeveloped. It can't even lift a 0.5 kg dumbbell. So, we've got to exercise it. And that takes work. Just like if you want to run a marathon, you've got to start training and you've got to give yourself enough time and you've got to know what you're doing. And ideally, I would imagine you need a coach. I mean, if I was going to run a marathon, I'd get someone who knew what they were talking about, because I know nothing about running. And so it takes time. And you have to commit to training however many times a week in order to run the marathon. Well, it's the same thing for us to actually become really resilient and to be able to feel our emotions, recognize them, and be able to sit with them so that we can feel them fully. Takes practice.
Yeah, especially because we fear feeling them. In the end, It's not the actual feeling that is the problem. It is the fear.
Yeah. It's the fear of never getting out of the hole. Like if you feel your sadness, you got to go down this black hole of sadness and never come out.
Exactly. I used to think that if I just don't cry, there is no tears, there is no water inside me. No, nothing. There is no crying. There is no poker face. Carry on.
Yeah.
And I used to honestly believe that if ever I told everybody about all the sadness and everything that was inside me, all the loneliness inside me, that I would start crying and I would never, ever stop crying. And it's interesting because, when my mother died, I was by that time willing to mourn, and I mourned properly. And I did start crying, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. But as I started crying, it wasn't the thing that I feared. I feared it so much that I would just never, ever cry. And as I started crying and I let it, it was the most liberating, no matter how sad I was, no matter how I realized. But now I'm not even, now I'm crying for my father that I never cried about. Now I'm crying for that cat that I never mourned because I got another cat in that cat's place. I realized I cried for the little girl that was so lonely and lost her house. So I cried for so many things, and that crying was the most transformative experience. But I was so scared of letting my feelings go. Like there's no end to it. There's always the end to it.
There's always an end to it.
Yeah, there's always better at the other side.
I had a teacher, and I don't remember which one said this because I've had many teachers, said that no memory you go back, every memory that you have of a traumatic experience, you survived because you're here, right? So going back to that in your memory, it can never be as bad as the real thing. And you survived the real thing. So you are safe and you can go back there because you're still alive. If it was going to kill you, it would have killed you in the happening. But it didn't. And I found that, I mean, I sometimes say that to my clients, really, guys, we can do this very systematically, and we can time it, and you can literally set the timer and decide you're going to sit with it for 5 minutes if you can't sit with it for longer. But, you got to just sit with it. It wants to be felt. It doesn't want to be fixed.
Yeah. And very often when you sit with it and you ask yourself, how old do I feel now? You feel very small. You don't feel like an adult when you start going into the debilitating feeling, the one that you fear all the time. You're actually experiencing it from your child attitude, and instead of experiencing it from the amazing kick-ass, together, experienced adult being that you really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I realized that I was driving to work one morning. It was during the therapy. And I realized that, we compensate with our own children. So we'll say, we'll promise that we're not going to do with our kids like what our parents did with us. Okay. So we compensate. So we do different. But we keep on parenting ourselves the same way in which we were parented. So if we had a critical parent, then our child, our wounded child, keeps on getting parented by us the same way as we now criticizing. We're saying, well, this is what messed me up. But then we keep on talking to ourselves, treating ourselves, abandoning ourselves in exactly the same way. And that was a big realization for me. That was like, oh my God, actually, Loretta, maybe your job is just to be the best parent to your little girl, because I have a little girl. All right. And so I consciously and unconsciously did all the things with her that I thought was missing with my mother. But I keep on doing the same things with me as what I thought was not, what hurt me from, and I understand my mother did the best she could with what she had. So this is not a blame and shame game. It's a realization like, oh my God, Loretta, what if you were Gia? So if Gia felt like this today, what would you say to her? You certainly wouldn't say to her, pull yourself together, get the hell out of bed, get in that car and go to work if you were sick. You'd go, oh, my lovey, let's stay at home. Let's make you chicken soup or whatever it is, right? Definitely not going to school. Here's your medication, what. Okay, so why would I not do that to myself? Why can I not give that to myself? And that's been revelationary for me, because it has really helped me recognize, first of all, how hard my inner critic bangs on at me. And when I see myself, I found a picture of myself when I was really little, and I thought I was really cute. I don't know, it's about like 6 or 7 months old, like, when a baby can sit up and like starts getting super cute. And I just imagine that little girl. Like, what would you say to that little girl? How would you treat that little girl? This is hard, because 9 times out of 10, I've already given her hiding and abandoned her, and then go, why am I feeling so shit? Oh, actually, this is what I did to my own little girl.
I ask all my clients to go and get a photo of themselves when they were small, and put it up there. If it's on a Zoom call, put it up there on your screen, because you're going to be talking to that little girl a lot. Because don't try and treat yourself away, that you are now treating that little girl. It makes a huge difference. Like when you start realizing how you are still treating yourself, how the language you use with yourself and the standards. I love this. It's a big realization for people to understand that this is what we are still doing. But you know what? I think that women move most women move to, and I'm generalizing, I know that, shoot me, but I do think that most women move to more emotional maturity because they learn through being a mother. I think your motherhood teaches you a lot about emotional maturity.
Absolutely. And I think your motherhood also, and I mean, I'm sure that people who are not biological parents, if you're extremely mothering towards your pets or someone else's children, it can be the same. But certainly for me is that, there were different stages of Gia's life that triggered things in me and that helped me go back to then. So, I had an experience of a sexual trauma when I was probably about 6 or 7. And I didn't tell anyone about it. And it was someone that was unrelated to the family. And because it wasn't penetrative sex, and because I didn't really understand what sex was at that stage, I didn't think it was a bad thing. I didn't think it was so bad, because of course you don't admit any weakness. And so by then I'd already had that coping mechanism. And it was only when my own daughter was 7, I looked at her and said, my God, she's so little. Like, how would you feel if he did that to her? Like, so this is not to get stuck in the wound. Like, oh, woe is me, I had this. It's not. It's just a realization that once again, there's unresolved pain from that, which I had just glossed over because I thought that because I wasn't raped and I wasn't held down and whatever, okay, it actually wasn't traumatic. Well, actually, it was. And so your child can really mirror to you. It can trigger, and the child not triggering, but just the life stage of this. It is very much so. And of course, you want to protect that child and you want to love that child. And no matter whether you're a good parent or a bad parent, however we judge that, parents love their children. And you want to keep them safe, right? And you want the best for them. And it is a beautiful vehicle to allow you to, as you say, get in touch with your own emotions.
Yeah, and we are blessed by that. We are blessed by anything that brings us awareness. It's the awareness that's lacking.
For sure.
Okay, so you are now not purely a homeopath anymore.
No, so as my career morphed, I started getting tired. First of all, I started getting intrigued by how is it that you can keep people on the path? Why, so what would happen is typically, exactly like you say, you're the kind of patient, you're the typical kind of patient who comes to the homeopath, tried everything, doesn't really believe in us, thinks it's a bit hoo-hoo, but no one else can help. So please, can you do something? All right. And so that's fine. So those are the kind of patients that we generally deal with. And it's usually some sort of chronic condition. And they change what they need to change. They, I don't know, eat the right food, cut out the whatever they're supposed to, take the supplements, start whatever they do. And then they start feeling amazing. And then, let's just say some people takes longer. So maybe it's a month or 2 or 3 months. And they, they've, I don't know, lost some weight. They feel amazing. Oh, thank you so much. I feel amazing. And off they go. And then a year later, I bump into them in the supermarket and they say, oh, I really must come and see you again because I need to get back onto that diet you put me on and blah, blah. And I mean, they look and feel terrible. I'm like, how did that happen? And so that's what really got me into this whole mind-body thing, the mind part of it. So I'd already studied the energy medicine part of it, which I thought was a bit fluffy. But what I realized since is that I almost want to say the energy part is even more important than the mind part, because the energy part takes us beyond the mind. So, the mind always lies, the body never does. And so your mind can still lie to you when you do the mind work. But when you do the energy work, you basically, you transcend the mind. So then I got into starting to teach more than one person. So first it was things like healthy eating and whatever. And then eventually it got more into the sort of energy kind of techniques and the sort of mind. And then I basically fused it all together. And in fact, when I had done I had a program that I produced before I started the therapy. And, I taught it once or twice and, it went all right. It wasn't great. It didn't make me feel amazing. And, during the therapy, I realized, so I've now got the energy and I've got the whole mind body thing and I've got the how can you be healthy thing and the habits thing, but I'd left the emotional part out. I didn't put any tool in for the emotions. And so that was the blessing, well, one of the countless blessings of the therapy, because then when I started fusing that together. So anyway, so I eventually got tired of private practice, and I closed my practice. Of course, now I'm going to say coincidentally, but obviously it wasn't coincidental. I closed my practice at the end of 2019, and the building was mine, and I needed to move out of the building. And I got a tenant, so I still worked from that building on and off, and saw a few patients here and there, dispensed some medicine, but actually was working more on my group teaching programs. And then the week before we had lockdown in South Africa, I actually moved lock, stock and barrel, packed the dispensary, everything, packed up my whole practice, said goodbye to it basically, and put it into storage, and came home. And then the lockdown happened. And then it was a case of, okay, well, sister, now you've really got to get this, you got to get this stuff going online. So I worked with an online marketing coach for a couple of months actually, and started working with first clients one-to-one online, doing online coaching programs, incorporating the mind, the body, the energy, most specifically, and the emotions, and various practical tools and techniques that people can apply so that they can actually feel different, not cured, not all their stuff sorted out in 2 weeks, but like manage themselves effectively as they grow into this exploration of themselves. And then, of course, once I had done that for a little while, then I decided, no, well, okay, it's time to put a few group things together. And so, I'm a rabid manual writer. I've got manuals of things I've never even taught. So, because that's how I learn.
Me too.
So I learn it from somewhere. I put it into what I know. I write a manual. I create a program. I teach it. I go, okay, that was great. So maybe we can make it better, and we can add this, or whatever the case may be. So now I work as a transformational health coach online with individuals and with groups. Having said that, health has become much broader for me, because I have clients who have relationship problems. I don't really deal with people who've got, I help people who've got career issues, as in they're not inspired and they don't know where they're going, but I'm not in the business and money line, So I'm in the, and yes, if your money and business is part of your problem, of course I can help you, but I don't consider myself to be how are you going to get rich coach, or how can I make you take your business and scale it so that you can make millions? I'm not that. I'm a health and wellness coach, really.
Okay, so we are really talking to people who have had low-grade post-traumatic stress disorder probably most of their life. That's what we are doing. That's really what we are talking about.
Sure.
And we are talking about an enormously big part of the population. So that, which will explain why we certain stuff just isn't, they are just not going to be addressed. If you go to a regular doctor, you maybe have 10 minutes to run in and out of bed, and there's no space for your emotions, and you have a whole lot of things that happens to you, and you don't quite know, inexplicable stuff, and you don't quite know what's going on. And so unless you go to anybody that puts together body and mind, who doesn't, if you talk to somebody who does not take into account that the body is telling the story of your life, and the body is going to have a day when it's going to go like, Louise, here, today is a day you cannot push yourself anymore. I have now topped, and you will now feel it, Whether it is that you've pushed yourself too much, or whether it is that you have squished down too many feelings, whether it was because, I had migraines, I couldn't get support unless I had a migraine. If I had a migraine, I would get support. And then keep on having migraines. That is how you get the support you so crave,
Right.
There are so many subconscious things that goes on, the unconscious stuff that goes on in our lives. And I think that after this conversation that we've had, a lot of people are going to think differently about I don't like the word alternative. You use another word.
Complementary.
Yeah.
Complementary medicine.
Yeah. I have no problem with using the word alternative. It's just that it's got a bad rap. and
Absolutely.
mostly from the medical fraternity.
It creates a polarity idea. It creates an idea
Yeah.
that Western medicine is bad and alternative medicine is
It's
good.
not.
And Western medicine is amazing at acute care. It's amazing at surgical intervention. It's amazing at trauma, physical trauma. And if we didn't have that, we'd be dying like flies. So, but
I people apologize for taking an antibiotic. I'm like, why? Don't apologize. I don't have a problem with taking an antibiotic.
No,
I, like
absolutely.
anybody who's trained like me, will say to you, don't just take the stuff without testing for it and finishing it.
Exactly.
Test, so use the right
or,
one.
And don't take it if you absolutely don't need it. So I know if I get bacterial meningitis, I'm not going to take a homeopathic medicine. I'm going to go to the hospital and let them put an IV infusion of antibiotics in them, because I haven't had an antibiotic for 22 years. The last one I had was when I had a cesarean with my daughter. I know it's going to work. So I don't have antibiotic resistance. So I'm all for antibiotics. It's going to save my life, right?
And you say this, but I go to my homeopath, and for my hormones and for burnout and my adrenals and everything else. And I said to him, I need to go to the doctor now because I've got this runny tummy. He gets this look on his face and he asks me a few questions. I can see there's something coming. He says, wait. And he gives me the little white pills.
Yes.
And before I get to the doctor, I'm fine. Literally in the next half an hour, I walk in and sit and wait for my appointment, and I am actually fine. And the terrible, terrible diarrhea that I woke up that morning and haven't taken anything for, and which the course of, what's going to happen. And here, my homeopathic doctor have just given me little white pills, and I have to put 5 of them under my tongue.
Yeah, and that was the end of the diarrhea.
It was the end of, I had food poisoning. It was the end of the food poisoning, right there.
Yeah.
I have never, ever traveled without that little white pills again. Never. I've taken those little white pills with myself. And there is an alternative. There's a definite alternative. And when you've experienced that, you can experience quite a lot of woo-woo and be open to the fact that there's more in this world. Like, I love medical science. Totally believe in it. Loved my job, but it's not all there is. There's more, no. and the more connects the mind and the body, and that is amazing. Okay, all right, Loretta. So your parting thought: if you're talking to somebody who's always been okay all of their life, and relentlessly happy, but they know that something is not quite right. I'm not actually talking to somebody who's not even that sick, so they're not even considering going to any kind of complementary medicine. They just know that something is not quite off. What is the conversation they must have with their body in order to start the journey before they walk into the wall?
Okay.
Very big question.
Big question. Okay, so what do you do before? Well, the first thing I would say, so by the time you know that something is off, it might be something like your energy levels aren't quite what you need them to be, or your immune system isn't quite. So it hasn't quite got to pathology yet. So the first thing I would say to them is that health isn't health doesn't an absence of disease doesn't mean you're healthy. Yes. So there's a difference between health and the absence of disease. And between pathology and health, there's a big spectrum. So, what's your energy level like? How well do you sleep? What are your relationships like? What's your temper like? What are your emotions like? Right? So anything that you can pinpoint. So let's just say you go, oh, I'm really tired. I'm so tired. I mean, I hear that so often. I'm so exhausted. Well, it's like your migraine. So the first thing I'd say to them is ask yourself, what does the exhaustion force you to be, do, or have? And how does that benefit you in your life? Because that will show you, it's a first step to what your unconscious agenda is on what your body's trying to tell you. So Louise, you so beautifully said, when you had a migraine, you got support. When you didn't have a migraine, you got no support. So if you were the person doing the exercise, you would have said, okay, well, what did it force me to do, be and have? Maybe it forced you to come to a complete standstill. What did you get? Got support. How did that benefit you? What did you do when you had a migraine? Maybe you got to sleep. Maybe your responsibilities were taken away from you for a little while. You felt supported. Because you felt supported, you felt loved, let's just say. So now my next question would
Worthy.
Worthy, what do you think?
Worthy.
How do you think you could get support? What is it about you, not about the other? What is it about you that you need to not change and not fix? Just what is about you that you have become aware of, and that you can develop a new strategy to get support without a migraine? Because you are quite worthy of getting the support. You're a genius. You've worked out a genius way for support, except that you're hanging over a bucket and you feel like death. So as it's been genius. So how about we find you a different strategy? So as soon as people start seeing that they're getting something for their dysfunction, for some people it's like revelatory. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And then you remove the resistance to the fatigue, let's say, and then you can start developing different strategies, and that opens a conversation. And what I very often say to people who are religious or very spiritual, people who pray, all right, is that the reason why God doesn't just heal people is because the body is sending you a message. So I think of it like, if I have to couch it in sort of very Christian kind of terms, it's like there's an angel on your shoulder trying to get your attention. And the more you ignore the symptoms, the louder it's got to scream, until eventually it's having a tantrum and you've had the heart attack or the burnout or whatever. Mm-hmm. So if part of this grand organized design that we live in, this beautifully designed, orchestrated universe, if part of that is that your symptoms are feedback of something that isn't serving you or needs to change or that you need to look at, then can you see how when you say, please God, heal me of this illness, that prayer is very difficult to answer. Whereas if you say, dear God, that crazy woman Loretta said that actually my symptoms are a message. You're trying to get the message through to me. Please help me find the message. Now, whether you pray to a Christian, but it doesn't matter who, doesn't matter whether that's yourself, you're asking your higher self. It's like, please help me find what this is trying to teach me so that I can grow into a more integrated version of myself. Because then we take away the idea that disease is punitive, that it's bad karma, that you're being punished because you were a bad person, that it's unfair. Actually, if you see it as part of a grand organized feedback scheme, it loses some of its fear. And I mean, we all get anxious when we're sick. Nobody likes being sick. And so, that was a very long closing thought, but that's where I would get them to start.
So I will add a little. Yeah, thank you. That was very powerful. There was a reason why I didn't even about interrupting you. So I will add a little bit from our emotional side, and you touched on it. If you are angry a lot, if you blame a lot, if you judge a lot, if you have emotions that are instant and all over the place, there's something that's going to come out in your body sooner or later. But your emotions are already telling you that you are suppressing something. Yeah. And then here's the big clue. Your relationship may be codependent and it may be working because somebody is settling. But you know what the difference is between a completely fulfilled, happy relationship and one in which somebody is settling. We all know it. We may not want to address it. We can just say happy, and it's like, it's fine. Yeah. But we, inside ourselves, we all know when somebody is settling. It's what Oprah says. It's what you nearly know. That's dangerous. What you nearly know is very dangerous. Yeah. And so these are the things that teaches us that we've got emotions, and these emotions, the sooner we address them, the less damage we're going to do to our bodies. So the sooner we get over our fear of addressing our emotions, and the sooner we start saying, you know what, there should be something, because I think all people should learn to say, there should be something that I don't know about, because I am living a life which has not been trauma-free, because who the heck is living a life that's been trauma-free? Like, none of us. Maybe 3% of the world don't have to show up for this work, and just because, I don't know. I mean, even though there's still a maybe there. But each and every one of us can do with becoming more present no matter what our eternal languages and no matter what our beautiful coping strategies look like. And I would prefer this before you fall apart, before your relationship fall apart, before you get sick. That's what I would prefer. That's, I want to get to you listening, the listener out there, when you are still unconscious. And I want to say, wake up while you are still unconscious and just say, what if I missed it? Like Louise missed it, like Loretta missed it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so all your information is just above the video. So just look up above the video. You'll find it there. And there's a link to something special from Loretta, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to go get it. Okay, so go click on that link and go get that something special from Loretta. Everything right above us. Okay. And please share it. Please share it far and wide, because people need this. People are desperately need this information. I am doing this one-day edition of this summit with real life tools that everybody needs there. It's not just stories. These are the things that people need in order to start changing their lives immediately. Right?
Absolutely.
So please share it. Somebody needs it. Lots of love to you. Thank you so very much, Loretta.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you to everybody who's watching. I'm clicking on the wrong thing.